Okay, guys, today we're going to talk about Carousel Lane. I'm going to use it as a case study. I do this for two reasons. Number one, when I look at any content that I consume, podcasts, videos, it's finding people ahead of me that are doing case studies on deals they're doing right now or have done. That's what I look for. So I try and share the same. And then number two, just emphasizing lessons that I wish somebody would have drilled in my head 5, 10 years ago. And so that's really the purpose of these videos. And specifically to this one, I want to drive home four different points, and we'll go through them one by one. But let me start with a quick overview of what we're talking about. So this is Carousel Lane case study. So right here is the house I bought in 2018. And initially, it was just a house hack. I lived in the master suite on the back side, rented out all three other bedrooms. Wasn't a whole lot of fun, but it was very powerful. It allowed me to leave my job. It covered my mortgage, utilities, gas, and groceries every month. And it got me building equity. And so I bought this at 275 almost 6 years ago. I remember there was a little bit of a dip right around this time in real estate transactions, which makes sense because there's a seasonality, but interest rates ticked up as well. So I actually refinanced it since the initial purchase. But let's get into the numbers today, because again, there's a video from a few years ago where I went through the house hacking numbers on this, but I want to talk about it today as a normal rental. So interest rate 3.625, monthly PITI 1497.97, and all of this is pulled right off the mortgage statement. 225 for utilities every month. Now, normally, if you're renting out a single family home in the traditional way, you don't pay for the utilities, but I rent this by the room, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So I pay the utilities. In the summer, it's like 180. In the winter, 240, 250. So on average, about 225. Trash is $70 once a quarter. So I just put 25 per month. I only have the lawn mowed about 4 times a year, $50 a time. So 200 amortized over 12 months is right around 15, something like that. This is Colorado. It's very dry. Now, very little in CapEx and repairs. This has been an overestimation. When I bought this, the prior owner had redone all the major components of this house, the roof, I mean, everything. And so it has been really stable. It's been more like a new construction building, but should always budget, so I do. And then vacancy, again, have had almost no vacancy, but like to budget, so I do. And then finally, I have a property manager. There's 4 tenants in this, and she gets paid $50 a month per tenant, so 200. And then rents are at 3,100. So this thing per month is realistically making me $937.03. Excel likes to round. I can't figure out how to change that. So it cash flows really well for a single family house. And quite frankly, it's a little bit more than that because these two are rarely real. So they always say, or a lot of people say, you can't get cash flow from single family. You certainly can. And sure, I bought this one in 2018, but the house I'm sitting in right now, I bought at the height of the market in 2022. I'm going to California for a while and renting this out. And I've done a similar sort of creative house hack here where this is going to cash flow when I leave it, even though it was a $650,000 house that I bought the height of the craziness of 2022. And so I'll do a video on that later, but this is still feasible today. You know, listen to the Big Picture Blueprint, our podcast episode with Craig Kurlop. He walks through how he's doing this in Denver today, but don't feel like, oh, well, he bought this in 2018. You can't do this today. You certainly can. So as of this last mortgage statement, it's May the 13th. So I pulled that. My loan balance was 241,648 and 84 cents. I'm not sure exactly what this would sell for. Zillow says 430 to 470. So I just went in the middle. I think this estimate was 452. Over $200,000 in equity in this thing. Other considerations, looking at the mortgage statement, $470 a month are amortization. So really, this is higher than what I have right here because this is just a savings account that someone else is filling for me, right? This is going down every month and the amount goes up every month. And then finally, I didn't do cost segregation on this because I bought it so cheaply. It's not that significant, but the depreciation allows me to pay no taxes on the income from this property every year. So it's a really powerful investment, but it's boring. It's taken 6 years, and it's just you hear so many stories of these massive deals that people do on podcasts where they made $100,000 or $1 million, and sure, those happen. But from what I've seen, in my coming up on 7 years experience here, and what I've seen with many of my older friends who are very, very wealthy, it's more a consistent buildup of these simple deals over the course of decades. That's it. You buy properties like this, and sure, you work to buy bigger and bigger buildings, but simple deals like this that are okay at first. This was okay. It didn't really make me money, but it covered some of my living expense. But 5, 6 years later, it's great. It's throwing off $1,000 every month. And that'll probably look even better 10, 20 years in. And so that's the first point I wanted to make is forget about all the exciting headlines and the exciting deals. Sure, I get some killer deals from time to time in my land business, but most of them are just simple base hits over and over and over again. And same thing with these rental properties. And so point number one of the 4 points I emphasized earlier is real estate is really boring most of the time, but very, very profitable if you do it consistently over the long term. And that takes me to the second point, which is if I could go back before I even started, I would focus entirely on very nice, newer real estate. I would not touch anything old. I would not touch anything in a C neighborhood. The only caveat to old is if it had been entirely remodeled, right? This is a 70s build, which is pretty old, but everything was updated from the roof to the infrastructure. So in effect, it was a pretty new house. So that's point number two is focusing on nice buy and hold real estate. Believe me, I let me make a point or an example. I was at my real estate group last week, and there was a kid there who was all excited about these properties he wanted to buy in Indianapolis and Cleveland. And these numbers look so great on paper, but they're not reality, right? Because he's looking at 100-year-old buildings in terrible neighborhoods, terrible tenant demographics. The paper numbers never turn out to be reality. So nice real estate gets nice tenants. And that's the third point where I think it's really important to take care of your tenants and focus on keeping good people in place. And so I say that because the basement renter, see, there's a door to this fence right here. You walk around the back and you can enter the basement as its own unit. She's been there for 5 years and I've not upped her rent at all because she's been fantastic. It's a single mother, her daughter, who's now, I guess, an adult. It was like 15 when they moved in. I think she would be 20 now. They live down there and she'll fix anything that breaks. She pays on time every month. She treats the house like it's her own. She's fantastic. I will never raise the rent on her. And I don't think you necessarily have to be that conservative, but if you are going to raise rent, be very modest, small increases on good tenants. Keep your good tenants. In this bedroom, there's a guy that's been there coming up on 3 years. In the back bedroom, the master that I had lived in when I rented here, there's a guy that's been there over 3 years. And then finally, we just had a vacancy for the first time in a long time in the fourth bedroom and are getting that replaced right now. So, point number three, treat your tenants well and really take care of good tenants. And the last point I wanted to make is renting by the room. I've heard so many people who've never done it talk about it as if it's not sustainable, as if you can't do it in the long term. You certainly can. Again, I'd go to that episode of our podcast with Craig Curlop. He's done it on a much larger scale. But I have two houses that have been rented by the room for years while I do not live in them. And they work great because we buy nice real estate, put nice tenants in it, take care of them. And what do you know? They take care of the house. So room by room rentals are totally feasible. Overall, they're probably a little bit more maintenance because, of course, there's just more turnover inevitably because you have more tenants. But the same could be said of multifamily in general. But that was point number four I wanted to make with this is that room by room rentals are totally feasible, especially if you set the house up right. Walkout basements like this are great. And you can get great tenants if you do the work up front, buy nice real estate, and screen accordingly. So To summarize, guys, the point I want to make here is if I could talk to myself 6 or 7 years ago, I would drill in the point of buying nice real estate only, no C neighborhoods, even B neighborhoods. They better be pretty darn nice B. Treat the tenants well, keep them for the long term. Remember that the sexy deals that you hear on podcasts, they happen from time to time, but generally it's these boring deals done consistently over decades that makes you rich. And number four, you can creatively rent these sorts of houses room by room and make them profitable. It doesn't have to be just a traditional rental. So this is a case study. These are real numbers. This happens every single month, right? So there's no reason you can't do this too. I bought this off the MLS. I bought it for, I think, 5% down. So the cash on cash has been outrageous. And there's no reason you can't do deals like this today.